我们走的路不是正道，这是离经叛道，罪不容赦。随我走吧！
我一定能够击败武可汗，成为草原上的霸主。再乱下去，只怕天下宗派都要反了。
要违抗巫尊的命令，你想死，你们都想死。
Couldn't help but feel a ticklish sensation in this very scene. A silent clash. 1 year older than Qinmu, dealing a heavy blow to the princess. Lin Yuxiu then turned the attack on Hulier, who had yet to take human form, trying to even the score. But Hulier's simple phrase, "The young master likes me," was like an iron wall, repelling all attacks, causing Lin Yuxiu to retreat in defeat. However, Lin Yuxiu quickly adjusted her mindset, feeling that as a human princess, getting jealous and competing with a fox spirit that hadn't even taken human form was truly beneath her dignity. So she let it go. Before they could reach the border pass, Libationer Bashan caught up with them. As soon as he saw the group, the burly man became distraught, thinking that the butcher had already passed away. He immediately began to wail loudly, cursing Heavenly Saber as he cried. Qinmu expended immense effort to finally calm him down, telling him the butcher had only left ahead because he found him too chatty. But once Libationer Bashan started talking, he couldn't stop. He grabbed Qinmu and began to pour out his grievances, from wetting the bed as a child, and getting spanked by Heavenly Saber, to washing Heavenly Saber's underwear, and stealing ducks, rambling on endlessly. Meanwhile, in the Imperial College of the capital city, the young ancestral master silently packed his bags, leaving behind his official seal and sash. Together with Elder Jifa, he quietly departed from the academy he had personally founded. At the mountain gate, he undid the chains around the Dragon Killen's neck. He told the Dragon Killen that his time of death was approaching, and he could no longer bring it along. He could only grant it freedom. The Dragon Killen was lost and confused, not knowing where to go. The young ancestral master said no more, and resolutely turned to leave. Outside the capital, the Imperial Preceptor of Yangkong had long been waiting to see off his dear friend. The young ancestral master confessed frankly that the reason he was unwilling to take the Imperial Preceptor as his disciple back then was because he had long foreseen that the Imperial Preceptor's achievements would far surpass his own, and he felt unworthy to be his master. At the moment of parting, the Imperial Preceptor was still somewhat confused, asking if the path of reform they were walking was the righteous path. The young ancestral master firmly told him that in the eyes of the so-called righteous path, our actions of breaking down sect barriers and teaching without discrimination are considered heretical, but in our own hearts, this is the true righteous path. He encouraged the Imperial Preceptor to ignore the mad barking of insignificant detractors, and to persist in doing what is right. Hearing this, the Imperial Preceptor of Yangkong's body trembled slightly. He bowed deeply, thanking this fellow traveler for half a lifetime of support. After the young ancestral master returned the bow, he left with Elder Jifa, heading for Young Prefecture, to preside over Qinmu's enthronement ceremony as the cult master. At the barbarian border pass beyond the Great Wall, Libationer Bashan, leading Qinmu and Lin Yuxiu, prepared to enter the pass. The defending general, although he had received orders from the sacred ground not to let the Heavenly Khan and the Butcher pass, but before Libationer Bashan's murderous aura, he had no choice but to yield, and opened the gates. On the city wall tower, Qinmu noticed a young barbarian boy practicing his fists. His foundation was solid, and his talent was extraordinary. The boy also saw them and loudly announced his name, declaring himself Ben Gongkuo, the youngest son of the Steppe King, and vowing to defeat the Heavenly Khan in the future, to become the sovereign of the grasslands. Libationer Bashan greatly admired this ambition and talent, and praised him highly, pointing him out to Qinmu. This boy will surely achieve great things in the future. Not long after they left, a shaman king from the Golden Palace of Lulan descended upon the pass. He learned that Libationer Bashan had been allowed to leave, and was about to fly into a rage. When he unexpectedly discovered Ben Gongkuo, the shaman king was overjoyed at the sight. He realized the boy was the one the venerable shaman had been searching for, the reincarnated, holy child, a rarity seen only once in several hundred years. With a special constitution, he ignored the general's attempts to stop him, immediately capturing Ben Gongkuo, taking him back to the Golden Palace. Inside the sacred hall of the Golden Palace, after the venerable shaman saw Ben Gongkuo, he was ecstatic, and immediately began the reincarnation ceremony. A strange, withered and skinny figure flew out, pressing its head against the top of Ben Gongkuo's. The soul and essence of the great venerable began to surge madly into Ben Gongkuo's body. while Ben Gongquo's soul was instantly scattered and destroyed. Reincarnation is an act of defying heaven and altering fate. The great Venerable foresaw that emissaries from the underworld would come to claim his soul. The Venerable Shaman immediately laid down a magic formation, using the skeletal remains of the great Venerable's 17 previous incarnations, to block the entrance between the mortal world and the netherworld. Soon, a ghostly wind swept in. A small boat with a green lantern hanging from it drifted slowly from the dark void of consciousness. An old man sat withered at the bow, making paper effigies. With a wave of his hand, countless paper men and paper horses charged towards the skeletons. Although the 17 skeletons could unleash god-level power, yet in front of the tip of that bizarre finger blade, and were easily shattered. As the small boat drew closer and closer, the lantern-bearing old man even reached out his hand to seize the great Venerable. At the critical moment, the great Venerable's old body fell to the ground, while Ben Gongquo opened his dark, glistening eyes. The strange phenomenon vanished in an instant. The connection between the two worlds collapsed. The underworld emissary retreated. The reincarnation was a success. The Venerable Shaman was thrilled, thinking that after the great Venerable was reborn, Heavenly Saber and the Imperial Preceptor of Yangkong would no longer be a threat. On the other side, at Kinmen Pass, Qinmu, for Libationer Bashan, refined a spiritual healing pill, using up a significant amount of dragon saliva. Afterward, he rushed from the apothecary. He received a message from the Ancestral Master, telling him to head to Yang Prefecture as soon as possible. He dared not meet their gaze right away. When Lin Yuxiu came out from her bath, she found that Qinmu had left without saying goodbye again, and felt a wave of disappointment in her heart. Libationer Bashan then decided to lead Lin Yuxiu back to the Imperial College, to see the young Ancestral Master off on his final journey. Qinmu hurried towards Yang Prefecture. All he saw along the way was the chaos of war. The fire of reform ignited by the Imperial Preceptor of Yangkong had already spread throughout the entire country. Sects and officials were rebelling one after another. The foundations of the empire had been shaken. He passed through the equally war-torn Luodu. Along the way, he encountered more than 10 groups of bandits and rebels who attacked him. Fortunately, his movement skills were swift, and he always managed to turn peril into safety. He grew more and more puzzled. What kind of follow-up plan could the Imperial Preceptor possibly have? To quell this monstrous chaos, he soon realized that if the Imperial Preceptor could truly use this opportunity to eradicate all opposing forces, then a united Yangkong Empire would become incredibly formidable. Moreover, the number of divine arts practitioners within Luodu was astonishing. Once the Imperial Preceptor successfully integrated all these forces, the overall strength of the Yangkong Empire would not decrease, but instead increase, receiving a massive boost. After arriving in Yang Prefecture, what Qinmu saw was a scene completely different from Luodu. Here, the people lived and worked in peace and contentment, a picture of a peaceful and prosperous age. He even saw several practitioners by the fields, using the spells of the heavenly devil cult to control wine blades, helping the farmers harvest the dry field rice. These practitioners were disciples of the Hall of Wine, but the spell they had learned, the autumn wine skimming the ground, was incomplete. Seeing this, Qinmu stopped and took the initiative to demonstrate for them the complete form of the orthodox spell and its many profound variations. He not only showed the wind blades skimming along the ground, but could also step on the wine blades to execute high-speed assaults. More importantly, he explained to everyone the principle that spells, sword techniques, and combat skills are all interconnected. He then applied the principles of the spell to his saber techniques. First, he executed it by controlling his saber pellet. Then, he demonstrated it with dual sabers, the power increasing with each level, fully showcasing the flexibility of the great educational Heavenly Devil Sutra. These few young cult members watched, dumbfounded, finding it incredible that a spell could be used in such a way. Qinmu patiently explained the subtleties of the magic spell, and learned from them that because of their poor family backgrounds, they couldn't afford to go to school, and could only use their spells to earn a living during the busy farming season. At this very moment, the young Ancestral Master and Elder Jifa quietly appeared. They had been observing from the side for a long time. The young Ancestral Master greatly praised Qinmu's comprehension, stating that passing the great educational Heavenly Devil Sutra to him was an incredibly correct decision, because Qinmu could think outside the box and develop multiple uses for a single spell, something previous cult masters had never even thought of. On the way into the city with the Ancestral Master, Qinmu saw many other cult members using incomplete spells to dig ditches and level ground. He realized that although the disciples of the Heavenly Devil cult were spread throughout the world, they generally lacked systematic education. He alone couldn't possibly guide each and every one of them. When the young Ancestral Master asked for his opinion, Qinmu pointed out incisively that the Ancestral Master had assisted the Imperial Preceptor of Yangkong in establishing a nation-wide school system, but had forgotten about the one within the heavenly devil cult itself. He proposed that the sacred cult must establish its own primary schools and colleges to cultivate talent and keep up with the times. He also suggested selecting the cult's elites to participate in the Imperial College's grand examinations, using the Imperial Court's resources to nurture the sacred cult's disciples and achieve the revival of the sacred cult. After hearing this, the young ancestral master lamented that Qin Mu wasn't born 40 years earlier, and clearly pointed out that this reform was the responsibility of the young cult master, Qin Mu. He also revealed that the previous cult master, Li Tianqing, was precisely because of his infatuation with Granny C that the sacred cult missed the reforms of 40 years ago. Afterwards, the ancestral master led Qin Mu to the city lord's manor in Yang Prefecture. This is a secret stronghold of the heavenly demon cult. Many high-ranking members have already gathered here. Everyone is waiting for the arrival of Granny C and the Sainess. Soon, Granny C's intensely enchanting voice could be heard, causing the minds of everyone present to waver. The young patriarch immediately stepped forward and ordered that Granny C must appear in her ugly, old crone disguise to avoid causing trouble for the child he raised. Qin Mu. During his enthronement ceremony, Qin Mu recognized Granny C, who had returned to her old crone appearance. Just as he was about to voice his suspicions about Granny C's disguised identity at the Imperial College, the Saintess, Xianxia, suddenly arrived. Qin Mu was stunned on the spot. He had always thought that his classmate from the Imperial College, Xianxia, was just a disguise for Granny C. He had even tested her multiple times because of this. However, the reality was, Xianxia was the current Saintess of the heavenly demon cult. The discussions among the elders present also confirmed that this generation's Saintess was far safer than the previous one, Granny C. Please do not re-evaluate immediately. Xianxia, realizing this seemingly shy woman was actually incredibly cunning. Previously, after he defeated the son of Buddha, Xianxia had shown off to him, which was actually a test for him, the young cult master. Granny C also revealed that the patriarch had originally been grooming both Qin Mu and Xianxia as candidates for the position of cult master, but Qin Mu's performance at the Imperial College was too astonishing, so the patriarch ultimately chose him. Xianxia was clearly not convinced by this decision. Before the enthronement ceremony began, the young patriarch noticed the absence of the former heavenly king. He solemnly announced that the former heavenly king had already sacrificed himself, and instructed Qin Mu to treat his descendants well in the future. Afterwards, the patriarch ordered the 360 halls to unfurl their banners. The massive banners blotted out the sky and sun, enveloping the entire city lord's manor and everyone within it, instantly teleporting them to Sacred Spirit Mountain. Sacred Spirit Mountain was a divine mountain floating in the void, a place not of the mortal realm. The young patriarch did not lead the crowd into the palace, but instead brought them to a spot beneath an ancient pine tree. This was the origin of the heavenly demon cult. The patriarch began to recount the history of the founding patriarch. Long ago, the founding patriarch met a sage here, a sage in human form. The sage taught the Tao for several decades and enlightened him, saying that to become a sage, one must establish virtue, establish merit, and establish words, the three immortalities. And to achieve these three things, one must understand principles, understand knowledge, and understand the teachings. Only with the three brightnesses can 10,000 people be saved. So the founding patriarch organized the sage's teachings and created the great educational heavenly devil scripture. He established his teachings in the world to spread these principles, founded the heavenly demon cult, and established the sage's path, with doctrines that were practical for the common people's daily lives, aiming to educate everyone under the heavens. Unfortunately, although the founding patriarch achieved the three understandings and two of the establishments, he never managed to establish merit. Therefore, he never became a sage. After recounting the history, the young patriarch formally asked Qin Mu if he was willing to inherit the virtue and words of the founding patriarch. Qin Mu said in a deep voice, in English. The patriarch then asked if he was willing to shoulder the heavy responsibility of educating the people. Qin Mu silently accepted, and so, the young patriarch bestowed upon Qin Mu the sage stone, upon which the sage had sat while preaching the Tao. He then announced to all the high-ranking members, whoever sits on this stone is the cult master, and also the sacred teacher of the heavenly demon cult. He ordered everyone, including the Saintess Xianxia, to bow to the new sacred cult master with the etiquette of a disciple. At the end of the ceremony, the young patriarch called out the name of the previous cult master, Li Tianqing. It turned out that Li Tianqing was not dead, but had transformed into a heart demon, hiding within Granny C's Tao heart. The patriarch ordered him to pass on the fundamental cultivation technique of the sacred cult. Qin Mu. Li Tianqing temporarily took control of Granny C's body, He placed his hand on Qinmu's forehead and began the transmission of the technique. In an instant, Qinmu's mind was filled with the complex Tao sounds of gods, demons, and Buddhas. He realized that this was the original scripture that the sage woodcutter had passed down to the founding patriarch. In the Imperial Preceptor's mansion in the capital city, the Imperial Preceptor of Eternal Peace's subordinate, Yun Yang, rushed to report, stating that the young prefecture city lord's manor, along with a large number of the heavenly demon cult's high-ranking members, had mysteriously vanished together. Yun Yang was extremely worried about this, but the Imperial Preceptor of Eternal Peace was unusually calm. He revealed a shocking secret to Yun Yang. The young patriarch of the heavenly demon cult is actually my own respected teacher, and also the senior who served for many years as the Grand Libationer at the Imperial College. Hearing this, Yun Yang's face turned pale with shock, mistakenly thinking this was a conspiracy by the heavenly demon cult to infiltrate the Imperial Court and the army. The Imperial Preceptor of Eternal Peace immediately corrected him. Recalling with reverence, he said, "It was this patriarch who was the first to cast aside sectarian prejudices and guide me wholeheartedly, showing me the way. It was also with the patriarch's letter of recommendation that I was able to meet the Tao master of the Taoist sect and gain permission to study the 14 volumes of the Taoist sword. And I also traveled north to meet the Tathagata of the Great Thunderclap Monastery to listen to the Buddhist Dharma." The Imperial Preceptor emphasized, "I invited the patriarch to oversee the Imperial College, precisely because I valued his broad-mindedness that could embrace the world, not because of his status or power." The Imperial Preceptor deduced, the patriarch's departure at this time must be for the succession of the heavenly demon cult's new master. Afterwards, the Imperial Preceptor learned that the Emperor had appointed Gu Linyuan to succeed as the Grand Libationer. He understood in his heart that the Emperor was wary of his power, and was attempting to use this to counterbalance him. Although he knew full well that Gu Linyuan's talent and virtue were far from sufficient for the position, he also understood the Emperor's concerns, and thus did not intend to interfere. As for the heavenly demon cult choosing a new master, the Imperial Preceptor's stance was very clear. Those who follow the reforms of the Eternal Peace Nation will prosper, while those who go against the trend will perish. He decided to personally go and meet this new heavenly demon cult master. At the same time, the Taoist sect and the Buddhist sect also received the news. The Tao master of the Taoist sect had an extremely poor impression of the heavenly demon cult, considering it a heretical cult of a false Tao that brought chaos to the world. He believed its internal ethics were chaotic, with Sanus's murdering cult masters, and concluded that the emergence of a new cult master was definitely not a blessing for the common people. Thus, he issued a decree, ordering his followers to investigate the new cult master's identity, and assassinate him when the opportunity arose. As for the reforms pushed by the Imperial Preceptor of Eternal Peace, which were similar to the heavenly demon cult's concept of teaching without discrimination, the Tao master was not optimistic. He contemptuously believed the Imperial Preceptor was overly ambitious and lacked the capability, not understanding the complexity of the world. In the end, he would just be like the grand empires of history, shattered to pieces, and become a part of the Great Void. The Tathagata of the Great Thunderclap Monastery also received the intelligence. He learned that the young prefecture city lord's manor had been taken over by the elders of the heavenly demon cult. He was even more shocked that the Imperial College student who had previously defeated the son of Buddha, Xianxia, was actually the current Sanus of the heavenly demon cult, with that person from 40 years ago, as the infamous cult master's wife from 40 years ago. Xiu, the Tathagata realized that the Imperial College had deliberately used the heavenly demon cult Sanus to suppress the Buddha sect, which greatly displeased him. He immediately ordered a thorough investigation. At the same time, the news that the Horse King God had left the Great Ruins plunged the Tathagata into deep shock. At this moment, on Sacred Spirit Mountain, Qinmu was sitting on the Sage Stone, receiving the initiation from the previous cult master, Li Tianqing. This power was transmitted through Granny C's body into his mind. Qinmu's consciousness was instantly pulled into an ancient memory. He felt as if he had become the founding patriarch of the heavenly demon cult. Seeing the woodcutter-like sage in the mountains, he stopped to watch the sage's felling technique. He watched for 100 years, by which time he had already turned into a pile of withered bones. But every move the sage made while felling the divine pine contained infinite wonders. Afterwards, the sage preached the Tao on the stone beneath the pine tree, and he spoke for several more decades. The supreme, wondrous principles of the great educational heavenly devil scripture, through this non-verbal sermon, were imprinted upon Qinmu's soul. When Qinmu awoke from the vision, he finally understood the true secret of the heavenly demon cult's grand unified technique. This technique had no fixed scriptures or diagrams at all. It was hidden within the artistic conception of the sage's sermon, what each generation of cult master could comprehend. depended entirely on their own perception, talent, and choices. 10,000 cult masters would result in 10,000 different versions of the Grand Unified Technique. At first, Shenmue thought this was simply a scam, but he soon realized this was the true way of teaching the Tao. This was the duty of a sacred teacher. What is learned belongs to others. Only what is comprehended truly becomes your own. After the initiation ended, Li Tangxing's spoke from within Granny C's body, pleading with the young patriarch not to interfere in the battle of Tao hearts between him and Granny C. It turned out that Li Tianqing was killed by Granny C back then, but he had transformed himself into a heart demon, planting himself in Granny C's Tao heart. The two of them shared one body and two souls. In a battle where only one could survive, the young patriarch chose to stand by and watch, because no matter who won, it would result in the creation of a stronger individual. Shenmue also understood why the elders in the cult detested Granny C. It was because her actions were entirely to protect him, and had to endure everyone's contempt. The young patriarch couldn't help but sigh. Granny C's beauty is a calamity that the secular world cannot contain. He could only forever play the part of the ugly old Jew, by forever playing the part of an ugly old crone. Afterwards, the young patriarch took Shenmue on a tour of Sacred Spirit Mountain, explaining the cult's history. Shenmue asked, "Why is the term enthronement used for an emperor, used for the succession of the cult master?" The patriarch explained, "At the height of the heavenly demon cult's power, it ruled over 6 nations, and the emperors of those 6 nations were all loyal subjects of the cult. Using the word enthronement was actually looking down on emperors. But times have changed. Now, the nation is the largest sect." The patriarch also brought Shenmue to a great hall, where the method for refining a teleportation device was carved on the walls. This was the secret method for the cult master to enter and leave Sacred Spirit Mountain alone. The patriarch taught Shenmue that the heavenly demon cult's techniques did not need to be kept secret. They could be taught freely. How much the disciples could learn was up to their own fortune. He also advised that, as the cult master, he only needed to manage the general direction, and not get involved in every single matter, lest it delay his own cultivation. Shenmue immediately proposed his first reform after becoming the cult master, to establish the 361st Hall, the Hall of Learning, to open primary schools throughout the cult, to teach the great educational heavenly devil scripture. The patriarch expressed his approval for this, and told him to entrust this matter to the left and right Dharma protectors to handle. Shenmue had an epiphany. The organizational structure of the heavenly devil cult was not a cult at all. It was a nation disguised as a cult. Finally, the young patriarch repeatedly warned him, "I know you have a hobby of dismantling things, but every hall and chamber on Sacred Spirit Mountain is inscribed with cultivation techniques and ancient relics. You must absolutely not take them apart." The moment of parting finally arrived. The young patriarch and Elder Jifa prepared to leave. Shenmue knew this farewell was forever, still insisted on seeing them off. By the side of this young patriarch, he had learned how to go from being a child to growing into a true adult. At the foot of the mountain, the patriarch bowed to Shenmue, respectfully addressing him as the sacred cult master. Shenmue bowed in return, respectfully sending the patriarch off. The two of them leapt away from Sacred Spirit Mountain under the moon, and vanished into the void. Shenmue knew that the patriarch would never return from this journey. After bidding farewell to the patriarch, Shenmue immediately summoned the left and right guardians in black and white robes, and issued his first command as the cult master. 1. Open a school. 2. Establish the Heavenly Records Tower on Sacred Spirit Mountain. It would be responsible for collecting all the scriptures in the world. He ordered the guardians to have the imperial colleges and the Heavenly Records Tower's entire collection copied, and made the burden on the surrounding court officials heavier. Also collect all of the court's cultivation techniques. The two guardians accepted the order and immediately teleported away. Seeing this, Shenmue couldn't help but marvel at the convenience of the teleportation technique. He also realized he was still trapped on Sacred Spirit Mountain. He dared not delay. He immediately ran towards the main hall with Hulinger, and began to study the teleportation technique on the walls. In the disabled elderly village of the Great Ruins, the atmosphere was desolate. The village chief and the apothecary, as usual, were slumped in their lounge chairs at the village entrance. The apothecary was the first to break the silence. He pointed out that the village chief had been slumped in that position for a long time, not even going back inside when the darkness fell. He seemed deeply troubled, but the village chief lazily retorted, "Your mind has been in chaos ever since Shenmue left." The apothecary was furious. He pointed out that the village chief himself was disheveled and dirty, while I, at least, have remained tidy. Only then did the village chief slowly explain, "It was Granny C, the night before last. She forgot to carry me, who has no arms and legs, back into the house. That's why I was left outside for one whole night. This just proves that your mind is the one in chaos." Just as the apothecary was being driven mad by the village chief's roguish logic. Both of them suddenly perked up. They sensed that a visitor had arrived. The village chief immediately urged the apothecary, "Take out the comb you carry with you." He had to tidy his appearance before meeting the guest. The visitors were none other than those from Sacred Spirit Mountain, the young patriarch who had just unburdened himself, and Elder Xixue. The village chief politely invited the two to sit down. The apothecary, meanwhile, brewed tea for everyone. The young patriarch also set aside formalities, and had Elder Xixue sit with them. After some pleasantries, the young patriarch stated the purpose of his visit. "I am no longer the patriarch of the sacred cult. I plan to stay in the disabled elderly village for a few days, to seek some peace and quiet. More importantly, I have witnessed Shenmu's extraordinary abilities. This overlord body, cultivated by all of you in the disabled elderly village, has my deepest admiration. Therefore, I have come specially to ask about the secrets of the overlord body and the overlord body 3 elixir technique." Unexpectedly, as soon as the words overlord body left his lips, the village chief and the apothecary reacted as if they had heard the funniest joke in the world. They burst out laughing, doubling over on the spot. Both of them rolled off their lounge chairs and onto the ground, pounding the earth as they roared with laughter. Tears and snot streamed down their faces. They merely said that the village was too dull, and it was rare for someone to come and tell a joke. This exaggerated reaction left the young patriarch and Elder Xixue utterly bewildered and deeply shocked. After laughing for a long time, the two of them finally calmed down and revealed the truth to their astonished guests. It turned out that the so-called strongest overlord body was a complete and utter lie from start to finish. Shenmu's constitution was just that of the most ordinary mortal body, and that Higman body 3 Cinnabar Palace was just a commonplace sight. Ordinary guiding technique used for strengthening the body. This truth struck like a bolt from the blue, leaving the young patriarch and Elder Xixue in a state of prolonged stupor. What was more crucial was not the lie itself, but that Shenmu had believed it without a shadow of a doubt, and he had truly relied on the most ordinary mortal body and the most basic cultivation technique to defeat countless geniuses and spirit bodies along the way, forging the might of a true overlord body through sheer force. In the deep discussion that followed, the village chief pointed out gravely, although that guiding technique is ordinary, to be able to practice it to Shenmu's level, he is likely the only one in all of history. The village chief suspected that this cultivation technique might be from the Great Ruins, an ancient heritage from before it became ruins. The young patriarch followed this line of thought and speculated, perhaps in that prehistoric era, ordinary people could originally practice this technique. It was the cultivation method for mortal bodies back then. After a great cataclysm, the rules changed. Ordinary people could no longer cultivate, which led to the 4 great spirit bodies becoming the mainstream today. The apothecary questioned further, then why was Shenmu, an ordinary person, able to cultivate it successfully? This can't be explained by hard work and resources alone. The village chief offered a startling hypothesis. Perhaps Shenmu is not an ordinary person from the current era at all, but rather, an ordinary person from before the cataclysm. When the young patriarch asked where such a person would come from, the village chief and the apothecary spoke a place name in unison, Carefree Village. The young patriarch became deeply interested in this mysterious place. The village chief proposed that he could take them that very night, deep into the darkness-shrouded Great Ruins, to search for this place. Meanwhile, far away on Sacred Spirit Mountain, Shenmu was facing a new problem. He had to wait outside the hall, while he focused on studying the teleportation technique recorded on the walls of the floating light hall. He quickly comprehended it thoroughly. This was not a teleportation divine ability that could be cast directly. Instead, it was an extremely complex method of artifact refinement. One had to refine it into a teleportation device, or a treasure like a teleportation robe. In order to use it, Shenmu discovered that the core of this technique was extremely profound mathematical calculations. To cast it directly as a divine ability, one would have to complete a massive amount of rune and formation sequence calculations and adjustments in an instant. He realized that the calculation classic his master taught him was far from sufficient. He needed more advanced mathematical texts. Perhaps only the Dao sect or the Imperial College's Jinyuan Hall would have them. With no other choice, Shenmu decided to give up on mastering the divine ability immediately. Instead, he would first refine a teleportation treasure. He decided to use the materials at hand, utilizing the 6-foot golden silkworm brocade robe he was wearing, relying on the exquisite tailoring and embroidery skills he learned from Granny C. He would implant the teleportation runes and formation arrays into the robe to refine a teleportation robe. Elsewhere on Sacred Spirit Mountain, the 3 heavenly kings who had not yet left, Heavenly King Shai, Heavenly King Lu, and Heavenly King Yu, were closely watching Shenmu's movements. They were well aware of the young patriarch's intentions. The teleportation technique was one of the most difficult divine abilities in the heavenly devil cult. The mathematical requirements were ridiculously high. The patriarch had deliberately left Qin Mu behind, wanting him to suffer a major setback with this divine ability. A huge fall. The three heavenly kings speculated that at Qin Mu's age, it was impossible for him to be proficient in mathematics. They estimated he would be trapped here for dozens of days. After experiencing the repeated setbacks of failing to cast the divine ability and failing to refine the treasure, the sharp arrogance of his youthful success would be completely worn down. Then, they would appear as elders and give Qin Mu a teleportation flag. This would not only allow him to descend the mountain smoothly, but also complete the tempering of the new cult master. While waiting, they also spoke with concern about the missing former heavenly king, suspecting he had met with misfortune. However, the turn of events completely exceeded their expectations. After just one day, Qin Mu walked out of the floating light hall, under the shocked gazes of the three heavenly kings. Qin Mu lifted his brocade robe and wrapped it around himself. His figure vanished in an instant. The next moment, with a loud crash, the nearby Phoenix Forest Pavilion collapsed by half. Qin Mu, covered in dust and grime, stood up from the rubble. He looked around guiltily, then quickly lifted his robe and vanished again. The three heavenly kings were aghast. The Phoenix Forest Pavilion was a sacred site commemorating the descent of the phoenix. They immediately discussed repairing it in secret and forging the inscriptions inside the hall. Before they could finish speaking, there was another loud crash. Because Qin Mu couldn't control his landing point, he had smashed through the roof of the Three Kings Hall from the sky. The Three Kings Hall was built to commemorate three cult masters who had sacrificed themselves for the cult. Its significance was extraordinary. Seeing the sacred sites being destroyed one after another, the three heavenly kings completely panicked. When Qin Mu teleported and vanished again, the three heavenly kings roared, "Little ancestor, you can't dismantle anymore," and activated their own teleportation treasures to chase after him. Although the three of them were far more skilled in the art of teleportation than Qin Mu, but the legendary path to the Qin tomb was completely without any obstructing magic. The three heavenly kings tried to intercept him, but miscalculated, and fell together into the fish viewing pond. They were attacked by several ferocious fish dragons inside. They reappeared in midair, teleporting away in a sorry state, trying to grab Qin Mu, but they only managed to grab each other's hands. Qin Mu had already vanished again before they could make a move. The three activated their teleportation treasures once more. With three thuds, their vision went black. Their bodies were tightly bound. They knew something was wrong. They hastily circulated their vital che to shatter their surroundings, only to find that by following Qin Mu, they had teleported themselves deep inside the trunks of several large trees. Qin Mu, having exhausted his vital che, was firmly stuck in an ironwood tree with a hard texture, unable to move. The three heavenly kings, not knowing whether to laugh or cry, rescued him. They were both shocked by Qin Mu's talent, managing to refine a teleportation treasure in just over one day, and had a headache from all the destruction he had caused. Heavenly King Shai sternly warned Qin Mu, "Every blade of grass and every tree on Sacred Spirit Mountain, every hall and pavilion, is an ancient relic of great significance. You cannot mess around as you please." Heavenly King Lu further pointed out, "The art of teleportation is extremely dangerous, especially when you are unfamiliar with the coordinates. Sacred Spirit Mountain is covered in forbidden areas. The slightest mistake could lead to eternal damnation." But far from being scared, Qin Mu was eager to go. He wanted to try again immediately. Seeing this, the three heavenly kings were horrified, and hastily tried to dissuade him. The Desire King, in a moment of desperation, had a flash of insight, and pointed out the young patriarch's true intention for leaving him here. "It wasn't for you to learn the teleportation technique, but rather in the hope that you, in this tranquil sacred land, could calm your mind and comprehend the heavenly devil cult's most core, great unification technique." Upon hearing this, Qin Mu had a sudden realization, understanding that he had been too eager for quick success, and had gone against the patriarch's painstaking efforts. He sincerely thanked the three heavenly kings, and decided to follow their arrangements, returning to the Saint's Rock to cultivate diligently. Only then did the three heavenly kings breathe a sigh of relief. While speaking in private, they all agreed that the young patriarch's tempering plan had completely failed. The patriarch had originally thought this extremely difficult teleportation technique would trap Qin Mu for several months and dampen his sharp spirit, but he never would have imagined that Qin Mu's talent was so monstrously gifted that he would find a new path within just 2 days, creating a legend. They came to the conclusion that the patriarch absolutely did not anticipate this. The Desire King suggested, "Since the tempering plan didn't work, we, as his subordinates, our only duty from now on will be to clean up after this mischievous and brilliantly talented new cult master." The Shy Heavenly King also agreed. Rather than letting Qin Mu stay on Saint Spirit Mountain and continue causing trouble. It would be better to send him to the Dire Fetus Academy sooner.